But I think we should start with the one that mattered most from yesterday. Sunday Night Football, the Detroit Lions defeating the Minnesota Vikings, getting that well-earned 1 seed. And I'm not saying that to take anything away from the Minnesota Vikings in the year that they have had, but certainly for the Lions to have all of these expectations, live up to it, have the record that they did while losing so many players that they did this season. Should be a job well done to them. They win this game 31-9. Now have home field advantage, so they will get a bye this week in the first week of the playoffs. Let's take a look at the top 5 graded Detroit Lion players here in this game. Linebacker Jack Campbell's at the top of the list with an 84.8. Defensive tackle Levi Onwuzurike with an 83.2. Running back Jahmyr Gibbs, what a day Jahmyr Gibbs had, 82.3. And then safety Kirby Joseph had a 79.1. Cornerback Terrion Arnold, a 74.1. And then Jared Goff with a 79.8 in this game. On the other side of things for Minnesota, edge rusher Jonathan Grenard with a 77.6. Linebacker Ivan Pace Jr., a 76.2. Edge rusher Jihad Ward with a 71.2. Cornerback Stephon Gilmore, a 70.9. Running back Aaron Jones, a 69.9. Sam Darnold in this one. We can talk about this. 45.8 PFF grade in this massive game. So we are going to break down this game because it meant a lot, and I think it holds a lot moving forward for both of these teams as they go into their playoff pushes. What was the stats that told the story here for you, Dalton?
Look, I think in different ways, the theme of both Lions-Vikings games that we saw that the Lions won both of them, the Vikings had their chances. You know, in the first game, they had a late lead, and Jared Goff brought the Lions down the field. In this game, it's about the red zone. Every single week, we have a team where the red zone actually means the red light to their offense, and that was the Vikings 0 for 4 in the red zone. 2 field goals, 2 turnovers on downs. They ran 14 plays in the red zone, 11 of them in goal-to-go situations, and they gained 10 yards on those 14 plays. Sam Darnold in the red zone, 2 for 11, 7 yards, a turnover-worthy play, 26.6 passing grade. The Vikings had their shot. They had their shot in the first half 4 straight times into the red zone. Yep. Jared Goff had 2 big turnovers that, they drove all the way down again, or the one was inside his own 10-yard line, and they just could not finish. I think we know at this point, no matter what the Lions have going for them on defense, they're going to score 30 points.
Yes.
Especially in that place with rocking like that, they're going to score 30 points. If you don't score touchdowns, you're going to lose. It's that simple. The Lions are going to drag teams into shootouts, and 31 points might be the best that anybody can hold them to. Outside of maybe Philly stands a chance, because I think that's the best defense in football right now. You go into Detroit, you better score 7s. If you don't, you're going to get beat, because the Avalanche is coming eventually, and that's what we saw last night.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway from this game is, one, the Lions defense. And it's a lot of the numbers that you mentioned. 0 for 3 for them on 4th downs, 0 for 4 in the red zone, 0 for 3 in goal-to-go situations, 23% on 3rd down. Hats off to the Detroit Lions, who allowed the least amount of points that they have allowed since week 9. Right? You talk about the offense, they're going to score a lot, but we're so worried about the defense, and I don't know if they're going to hold a team in the playoff to single digits again, but it was great to see it from them, because we haven't seen that from them in a long time, since week 12. Again, this is the lowest point total that they have held the team to. I think specifically, another stat that told the story, or maybe something that is worth noting moving forward, is we've talked about here on this show the struggles that Sam Darnold has had in the red zone. Now, I would say for the greater part of the last 2 months, it has felt like he's sort of figured that out. Really, month and a half. I would say like right before Thanksgiving, most of December, it has felt as though Sam Darnold was not an issue for him anymore. But the first half of the season, if you were to nitpick something that was going wrong with the Vikings' incredible run, it was, Darnold's a little reckless in the red zone. He's putting the ball in harm's way. He's turning the ball over. It's a lot of turnover-worthy plays and just some low completion percentage and some conversions overall. We saw that again last night. And it's a little bit worrisome, because I saw this morning from Nate Tice from Yahoo Sports. Nate was saying that you go back and you watch those red zone plays for the Lions defense, and really no matter how the Vikings lined up, the Lions were matching them in base personnel. They were saying, you're not going to run the football on us. You can pass it, and if Sam beats us with his arm in the red zone, so be it. And I think that is a brilliant risk that the Lions took on defense, because when you face teams as potent on offense as the Minnesota Vikings, you have to pick and choose. You can't cover all of it. If you try to cover all of it, you try to defend all of it perfectly, you're probably going to lose, or at least they're going to light up the scoreboard. But they picked their battles here, and they said, Sam has struggled in the red zone in the past. And we are going to say, if you're going to beat us, you're going to do it with your arm. And he's been hot and cold in that area for a total in 2024. So it was one of those bets that I really liked because I think that it was driven by successes and failures that we've seen throughout the season. I think there's a lot of data points that point to this being a great decision. And, of course, the film itself. And what we saw from Sam Darnold was there were times when he was just a little bit off in the red zone. And that made all the difference in the world for this team. It allowed them to get an upper hand. Even with making this bet to defend the red zone the way that they did, I don't know if they thought they were going to win 31-9. But to even limit them to 1 or 2 less touchdowns than you would normally expect the Minnesota Vikings to convert in the red zone, that's all the margin that you need if you're the Detroit Lions. So that, to me, is the stat that told the story. Again, it's to the Lions defense, but it's also a little bit more of the Vikings. And it worries me a little bit. Is this a little more of a blueprint here? And is it just going to come down to Sam's got to execute better in the red zone when they get into the playoffs?
No, this was the Aaron Glenn legacy game, right? I know there was talk about at least Alex Anzalone getting healthy, and he was mixing up, Glenn was mixing up coverages, man and zone, and even combo down there in the red zone and sending blitzes when it was the right time to send them. And I think the key to it all is the Lions' mentality on defense. It is an attacking defense as much as they run man, as much as Glenn likes to blitz. But I think for this team, they really are bend but don't break. They have to be, right? Because they just, again, like you mentioned, 9 points, stellar, A-plus job. Even if the Lions, any day the Lions give up 24 or less, I think they're going to feel really good about it because they know what this offense can do. They've proven over and over there's almost no way to stop it, especially if you don't get consistent pressure on Jared Goff. And he made mistakes early in this game. There's no way to stop this offense. I think at home, I don't know how they score any less than 30 points on any given night. So I think the goals here between bend but don't break, apply pressure to a quarterback who still hasn't made a ton of starts in his career, and I know he's been great this year, and you mentioned it in the red zone, make him beat you. Make him beat you because I think the biggest thing with Kevin O'Connell is that he's arguably the best coach in football right now at creating open windows for his quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. Well, when those windows are tighter, like you mentioned, and you're daring them to throw the football, and down in the red zone, he just not a whole lot of space to get it there. You saw Darnold. He was on his back foot. He was missing throws. I think for the Vikings on offense, I don't know that they could have done anything more schematically to help him. I just think he was missing throws.
Yes.
He was feeling the heat. Everything was fast, and he was just missing.
And it's not that he's not capable of hitting the throws, but again, it's the bet that you take if you're the Lions defense, and you just go, we're going to play him as best as we possibly can, and perhaps this is not his night. And it wasn't his night against the Lions, but I wonder if you force him into more of those situations, do the Vikings look a little bit more vulnerable than they have really throughout the whole regular season, because they barely did throughout that time. So Darnold was my most disappointing.
Same.
So sort of the stat that told the story goes into the Darnold conversation. My most impressive, I'm going to go with cornerback Amik Robertson for the Detroit Lions. He didn't have the best grade in terms of coverage grade. I believe his coverage grade was right around 61.0 because he did give up a handful of catches, but had 2 forced incompletions, had a dropped interception that he was able to get his hands on, could have come away with that one. Covered Justin Jefferson for a good part of the night, and of course the quote afterwards where he gets the game ball from Dan Campbell and he says, hey, they tried to bury me, but can't bury what comes from the dirt. So, I mean, that's just a badass quote. You can tell the locker room absolutely loved it, and the vibes are high for the Lions. I'm really excited about this team. I want to make sure that I say this, and it's not any sort of slight to the Vikings, who I also have loved watching throughout the course of this season. But with all the injuries that the Detroit Lions have faced, I enjoy the fact as a fan of the game that they're going into the postseason with the vibes very high. If they would have lost to the Vikings, I'm not going to lie, I'd be a little bit worried about this team, given the fact that they're going to have to be on the road the whole time. Can they have another defensive performance like that again? And if they lost, they probably wouldn't have had as good of a defensive performance. I'd be a lot more worried about the Detroit Lions if they would not have won this game than I am with the Vikings. I think the Vikings are going to be just fine.
I think there was 3 levels of this. There's one, if they would have lost, I'd have been extremely worried. I would have been worried that they would have lost in the first round if they had to go to LA or Tampa.
I agree.
Had they won this game in the shootout that we thought it was going to be and their defense still struggled, I would have been like, okay, they earned the one, but I still don't know if their defense is good enough. I still might lean toward Philly. Their defense playing like this in this game with Anzalone coming back, Amik Robertson, like you mentioned, Terrion Arnold, we'll see where his injury goes if he can be back in a couple weeks. He had his highest graded game of the season. That's a pretty good time for it, right?
Yep.
I think all of those factors and the way their defense played in this game just might reaffirm them as the NFC favorite, especially with the 1 seed and a week off and all the games at home. And you figure in their first round matchup, they're going to play either LA, Tampa, or Minnesota again, who they've already beaten twice. So I think.
Did you see Dan Campbell said that after the game with the handshake with O'Connell?
Oh, he said, what does it see you in 2 weeks?
He said, see you in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Well, the Vikings got a tough task. They already lost once at LA.
I know. No, LA's no pushover, man.
They're dangerous, and I think a veteran quarterback like Stafford is a huge problem for Brian Flores' defense. He eats up young quarterbacks, but veteran guys we've seen they can at least diagnose things a little bit better.
We
know
really
Stafford
do
can
have
do that with the best
excellent matchups in the NFC, and obviously we'll bounce around all of this. You get a rematch of Week 1 with the Eagles and the Packers, except hopefully. Jordan Love's out there the entire time for this one, although I know he sustained a little bit of an injury this past week. But you're hoping everything's good to go. You hope Jalen Hurts is good to go, right? I think this could be an awesome matchup with these two teams this week. Bucks, with the Commanders, another rematch of Week 1, but
that's the fun one.
Jaden has grown so much, but Todd Bowles has shown that he really knows how to get after these quarterbacks that have this dual threat ability and frustrate them more than other coaches normally do. So that's going to be fantastic to watch. And then, of course, the Vikings and the Rams, one of the very few teams that the Vikings lost to this season. And it's tough to go out in L.A. and just straight up, it's tough to beat Sean McVay. He's a phenomenal head football coach. Anything else in this game before we move on?
I want to throw out my most impressive. I'll tell you what, when everyone criticized the Lions for taking a running back and a linebacker in the first round of the draft last year, Dan Campbell shutting that up real quick. First, Jahmyr Gibbs, 28 touches, 170 total yards, 4 touchdowns. He's got 70 scrimmage yards at least in every single game this season. I mean, and then Jack Campbell at the top of that highest graded list, and I think he benefited a lot from Alex Anzalone coming back just to be able to play more free and know that other guy next to him can get the job done. I talked about the struggles of Lions linebackers lately. Campbell, 7 tackles, 3 pressures as a pass rusher, allowed 5 catches, but only for 18 yards, 82 coverage grade. I think these two guys, with Montgomery hurt and with the Lions really needing help in the middle of their defense, I think Gibbs and Campbell might be the X factors in this whole thing. And I've told you about Jack Campbell the last couple weeks. If you get the Jack Campbell that we saw in the second Packer game and in this game, this defense completely changes because he's got a boatload of potential. He can do everything on a field as a middle linebacker. He just has to do it more consistently. I think he's maybe my number 1 player to watch in this entire process, Jack Campbell, because if they can get the middle of the field straight, obviously the safeties are great behind him, and we know the D-line is going to be what it is until maybe they get Hutch back in the Super Bowl. But I think that's been the biggest problem for me is at linebacker. If Campbell and Anzalone play the way that they did last night, then I think they'll go to the Super Bowl.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below, so if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you can become one today.